A very good evening. My name is Dr. Kamal Kumar. I am medical lead from Ajanta Pharma. And on behalf of Ajanta Pharma, I welcome all of the esteemed experts for today's meeting and all of the delegates. So first of all, on behalf of Ajanta Pharma, we salute all of the doctors who are the true warriors in the current pandemic battle. A very heartfelt thank you to all HCPs across the country. So regarding today's agenda, it's digital dialogue. The topic for today's meeting is combination therapy in hypertension, rational and clinical evidence. Our speaker for today's meeting is Dr. Girish B. Navasundi, and we have expert panelists Dr. P. R. Vaidyanathan and Dr. Rajiv Gupta with us. So before starting the meeting, I would take few minutes of yours to take you through the brief introduction of our experts as well as corporate presentation. So the Dr. Girish B. Navasundi is a senior consultant interventional cardiologist at Apollo Hospital, Bannerghatta Road, Bangalore. Dr. Navasundi has performed more than 4,000 angiograms, about 1,600 angioplasties, both coronary and peripheral, etc., and many PDA closures, ASD device closures, IVC filter deployment, permanent pacemakers implantation, and implantation of devices for heart failure drive, CRT, AICD, etc. He has extensive experience in uses of rotablation, IVUS, FFR, IABP, distal protection devices, covered stents, IVC filters, thrombectomy, intravascular thrombolysis, and embolectomy and distal embolization. Dr. Girish Navasundi is the first cardiologist to implant absorbed stent in private healthcare sector in the state of Karnataka. He is the first cardiologist to implant MRI compatible AICD system in system of Karnataka and first cardiologist to implant tapering coronary stent in the state of Karnataka. Dr. Navasundi has special expertise in complex coronary angioplasties, heart failure and sudden cardiac death treatment strategies, transcatheter treatment for vascular heart disease. He has presented many papers as well as he has to his credit many publications as well. A warm welcome to you, sir. With experts, we have Dr. P. R. Vaidyanathan, who is Director of Operations and Senior Interventional Cardiologist at GKNM Hospital, Coimbatore. Dr. Vaidyanathan is consultant and interventional cardiologist at G. Kuppuswamy Naidu Memorial Hospital, Coimbatore from 1994 to January 2018. And he has been chairman of cardiology since January 15, 2018 to May 2020. He has been operational director since 11th April 2020. Dr. Vaidyanathan has many awards under his credit. He has been awarded with the Dr. Kartiyani Amma Memorial Award in June 1981, and he was awarded with Dr. A.R. Menon Memorial Award IMA Kerala branch in 1981 for Best Outgoing Student. In 2017, he was awarded with the Distinguished Service of Community to Community Award by Indian Medical Association Coimbatore branch. And in 2014, he was awarded with the Lifetime Achievement Award by IMA Coimbatore branch and Cardiology Society of India. In 2016, he received Distinguished Service Award G. Kuppuswamy Naidu Memorial Hospital at Coimbatore also. Dr. Vaidyanathan has been principal investigator of Rochette AF trial, sustained release nicorandil in chronic stable angina, and he has been sub-investigator of STITCH trial, heart failure study, and ACS registry, etc. also. So along with being professional membership of many societies like Asian Pacific Society of Cardiology, Indian College of Cardiology, and he has been member of Cardiological Society of India and the Interventional College of India also. Dr. Vaidyanathan has presented various papers and given lectures at various regional, national, and international meetings. And he is being invited as faculty at various meetings conducted by Cardiological Society of India, Indian College of Cardiology, and Interventional Council of India, and has also been invited faculty at international meetings. Warm welcome to Vaidyanathan, sir. We have another very senior panelist, Dr. Rajiv Gupta with us. Dr. Gupta is the chairman of preventive cardiology and medicine at Eternal Heart Center, Care Center and Research Institute, Jaipur. He is chairman academic research development unit at Rajasthan University of Health Sciences, Jaipur, and board member of World Heart Federation, Geneva. Dr. Rajiv Gupta is a researcher, preventive cardiologist, rehabilitation specialist, and consultant physician, and has an experience of more than 42 years in these fields. He is pioneer in coronary heart disease and hypertension epidemiology in India. Dr. Gupta has established the first cardiovascular epidemiology research laboratory in non-governmental sector in country. He has been doyen of preventive cardiology, hypertension, and cardiovascular epidemiology in India, with more than 1,000 publications, including 700 original articles and 100 book chapters. He is among top 1% of global medical scientists and first in India in field of research. Dr. Gupta has a wide work experience with him. He has been chairman of academic and research development unit at Rajasthan University of Health Sciences, Government of Rajasthan, Jaipur. He has been guest faculty at medicine at RUHS College of Medical Sciences. He has been senior consultant and head of medicine, director of research and academics at Fortis Escorts Hospital, Jaipur, India. And also he was professor of medicine at Mahatma Gandhi Medical College, Jaipur, head of medicine and cardiology at Moni Lake Hospital and Research Center, Jaipur. And he has worked in Cornell University at New York and Hammersmith Hospital, London. A very warm welcome, Dr. Gupta, sir. So just for few minutes, I would like to take you all through our corporate presentations. Our commitment towards the CSR activities during COVID pandemic. We have done many corporate social activities, including providing ventilators, thermal thermometers, sanitizers, protective gears, etc. We have distributed food grains to migrant laborers and daily wage earners across different locations. We have provided medicines free of cost to various authorities and organizations during this COVID pandemic. And we had co-partnered to set up 30,000 square feet tented COVID hospital for 300 beds at Racecourse, Mumbai, with the 30 ICU beds at 4,000 square feet dome in Worli, Mumbai, and 2.5 lakh meals and ration bags were distributed to people affected by lockdown and Cyclone Nisarg at Raigad district. Team Azenta is more than 7,500 strong employees with team from 28 nations. We have very strong presence in select segments like cardiology, diabetology, ophthalmology, dermatology, and pain management. And we are among top companies in cardiology and diabetology. We have 7 state-of-art manufacturing plants across India, including Mauritius also. And we have a very strong R&D thrust with around 750 scientists working across our R&D facility. So with this, without taking much time, I would request our today's speaker, Dr. Girish B. Navasundi, to kindly take the presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal, for that, broad outlay that you have shown, and great introduction. It's my humble privilege to be sharing a platform with Dr. Vaidyanathan and Dr. Rajiv Gupta, who have been such accomplished physicians. And I thank Ajanta Pharma for bringing us together to discuss this. If you've stopped sharing, then let me share my screen.
Yes, sir, I have stopped sharing. Yes.
Are you able to see it?
Yes, sir, we can see, sir.
Yeah. So it's wonderful that we all know the greatest challenge of the millennium is hypertension and associated morbidity and mortality. So the discussion of combination therapy in hypertension, its rational and clinical evidence, is a very, very pertinent topic to discuss, and all three of us would be speaking and discussing, and I hope this will enhance the understanding by the physician community. So if I have to take you, the hypertension in India, if you see the current scenario, The prevalence of high systolic blood pressure in adults aged 30 years or older is about 250 million. So 1 in 5 young adults suffer from hypertension. Can you imagine? 1 in 5 young adults suffer from hypertension in India. And you can see by the, the color, when you look at the prevalence, where it is the highest, whichever are the red, like Himachal, Punjab, Kerala, this is where you have the highest. The least probably is in some Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan. What is more important is every 1 in 2 Indian patients have uncontrolled blood pressure. Even when you diagnose, only 50% are able to be controlled with the medication. That's been the, that speaks for our physician community's ability to diagnose and preserve the control, reach the goal of therapy. So when you look at the percentage of people who are screened, if you screen between 69 to 84 patients, the awareness was only in about 35 to 55%, but how many were treated? Very, very abysmal. On an average, about 14 or 15%, and how many were controlled? Only about 7 to 8%. So that is the state of affair in 2019, as recent as 2019. And when you look at the cardiovascular mortality risk, with each 20 millimeters of mercury of systolic and 10 millimeters of mercury of diastolic increments, when you look at them, the cardiovascular mortality risk increases steadily by 2 times. If it is 1% at 115 by 75 millimeters of mercury, it becomes 2 times at 135 by 80, and it becomes 4 times at 155 by 95, and it becomes 8 times when the blood pressure is 175 by 105. So every increment of about 20 systolic blood pressure or a 10 diastolic blood pressure increases the chance of either myocardial infarction, heart attack, or stroke and heart failure by 100% more. So when you look at the population-based strategy for systolic blood pressure distribution, when you look at the before intervention and after intervention, look at the steep fall that you can see. Once you intervene, the yellow graphs, both are yellow. I don't know how well they are delineated, but you can really bring down the blood pressure much quicker and to a much greater extent. So when you look at the reduction in systolic blood pressure, a simple 2 millimeters mercury of systolic reduction leads to 6% reduction in stroke, 8%, 4% reduction in coronary heart disease, and total mortality is decreased by about 3%. And if you decrease the same systolic blood pressure by about 5 millimeters of mercury, there's a 14% relative risk reduction in mortality. Stroke, coronary artery disease is decreased by 9%, and total mortality is decreased by about 7%, just as little as 5 millimeters of mercury. So benefits of achieving goal of blood pressure, you need to really focus why it is important to bring the patient to a goal. When we say a goal for each patient, we know ideal is between 120 to 135 systolic, 75 to 85 diastolic. If you have them in that, stroke incidence can be reduced by 35 to 40%, myocardial infarction can be reduced by 20 to 25%, heart failure can be reduced to an astounding level of 50%, it can be reduced. Every 2 millimeters of mercury decrease in diastolic blood pressure reduces cardiovascular disease by 6%, just 2. And every 2 millimeter decrease in systolic blood pressure results in 7% reduction in death from IHD and 10% from stroke. Death I'm talking about. When you look at the lowering BP reduces cardiovascular risk, small systolic BP reductions yield significant benefits. We know it just gets amplified. Meta-analysis of 61 prospective studies have shown that 2 millimeter mercury reduction in systolic blood pressure, there's a 7% reduction in risk of death due to ischemic heart disease and 10% reduction in death due to stroke. That is the beauty of being aggressive and bringing a patient into good control. So when you look at what is unacceptable, the BP control rates, and how do you make them acceptable with an aggressive treatment? If you look at here, in 1976 to 1980, when you look at awareness, treatment, and control, awareness was only about 51%, and treatment patients were only 31%, and only 10% achieved the controlled their blood pressure with lifestyle modification and drugs. When you look at the 1988 to 1991, which is about a decade later, there's awareness went up to 73%, the treatment went up to 55%, but the control steadily increased 29%, almost 290% increase in control rate. But since then, it's been stagnant. Any increment is not really worth amplifying. So awareness, even in 1999, 2000, that's about 20 years ago, is still around 70%. Control diagnosis and treatment is about 59%. The goal achieved in only 34%. How much we are lagging in terms of control, this is a bad indicator. Now, when you start managing these patients to bring them into a good control, you need to have good pharmacotherapy, and monotherapy is not going to be enough. That means one drug will not be able to cover in most of these patients. When you look at all these trials, whether INVEST, CONVINCE, ALHAT, ABCD, UKPDS, HOT trial, MDRD, all of them will show you that most patients will require 2 or more medicine to control their blood pressure. The majority of hypertensive patients need combination therapy to achieve BP goals. You can look at here, ALHAT, 60% of those whose BP was controlled to less than 140 by 90 received 2 or more agents. 60% required 2 or more agents, and only 30% overall were controlled on one drug. Only 1/3 will require one drug, but 2/3 will require 2 or more drugs. That is the reality. So that's why you're looking at 2 drugs and how to introduce them together, and how to maintain compliance so that you have a consistent, good control of blood pressure. So the common denominator to all the hypertension guidelines is that initiate the drug treatment of hypertension with combination therapy, not monotherapy, and uptitrate the monotherapy and then introduce the next drug when the blood pressure is beyond 160/90. The effect of fixed dose combination on treatment adherence, you look at it, treatment adherence in patients with hypertension. When you look at all these 5 trials and overall, it says that it's always better with a fixed dose combination. It can improve the compliance right from about 19% to 26% more than monotherapy and then up titrating, or 2 separate pills. It increases by about 24%. When you look at the ratio of observed or expected incremental BP lowering effects, expected or observed incremental BP lowering effects of adding a drug or doubling the dose of the same drug. When you look at the green bars, these are adding a drug to another class of drug. The blue one is increasing the dose of the same drug. When you look at any class of drug, be it thiazide diuretics, beta blockers, ACE inhibitor, calcium channel blocker, or any of these, all of these, the adding another class of drugs significantly improves the reduction in blood pressure compared to increasing the dose of the same drug that patient was taking. So what did this lead to? The guidelines changed. They say that beta blockers preferred in elderly with IHD. That's a statement because these days, people think beta blockers are not a drug for primary hypertension, but when there is a ischemic heart disease, it becomes primary drug. Or what we call compelling indication is for beta blocker, and then you add on other drugs, at least for the first 1 year. And if there's an LV dysfunction, it becomes first line of drug. For all others, when you look at it, that the goal has to be less than 140 by 90, and always start with one drug and quickly move on to fixed dose combination of drugs. When we look at the combinations, I think we can combine any of the 3, that is calcium channel blocker, beta blocker, calcium channel blocker, ACE inhibitor, diuretic, ACE inhibitor, calcium channel blocker, diuretic, but the best combinations we will be discussing. When hypertension is the only or main condition, especially like Black patients, calcium channel blocker or thiazide like diuretics becomes the most preferred. And the next add-on would be an ARB or AC inhibitor, and then combination of calcium channel blocker, AC inhibitor, or an ARB and thiazide diuretic becomes triple drug combination. So the whole goal should be to start, if BP is less than 160/90, you can try any one of the drug, which are the first line drugs like calcium channel blocker or thiazide like diuretic. The minute you need two drugs, so choose a fixed dose combination drugs, usually calcium channel blocker with an ACARB or a diuretic with an ACARB. And then the minute, even with that, BP is not less than 140/90, move on to a triple drug single combination pill, that is having calcium channel blocker, AC inhibitor, ARB, or a thiazide like diuretic. This is going to be the philosophy that is being advocated and needs to be followed. And when you look at the non-blacks, the white and non-black patients, AC or ARB becomes the first line of drug, and the add-on, first add-on will be a calcium channel blocker or a diuretic, and third would be a combination of calcium channel blocker, ACE, and a ARB or a diuretic. So instead of calcium channel blocker or a diuretic, which is the most preferred in African ancestry, for all others, I think it's ARB or an ACE or a calcium channel blocker or a diuretic. That's how you look at it. White and other non-black patients, 80, 60 years or older. When you have someone who's beyond 60 years, again, calcium channel blockers and diuretics become the first, although AC inhibitor ARBs are also very effective. But when somebody is younger than 60 years and non-black, I think ARB AC becomes the first choice, and then you add calcium channel blocker or a diuretic. Now, when hypertension is associated with other conditions such as hypertension and diabetes, ARB AC inhibitor becomes the first choice, and then you add either to AC ARB a calcium channel blocker or a diuretic. And if these two combinations are not able to bring down the blood pressure less than 135 and 85, and then definitely add the third drug, AC ARB, diuretic, and calcium channel blocker, fixed dose combination, single pill. When there's a hypertension and chronic kidney disease, again, as long as the GFR permits and potassium permits, ACARB are the first line of drugs, and then you add a calcium channel blocker or a thiazide diuretic, or combine all three of them. Third condition is hypertension and clinical coronary artery disease. Beta blocker plus an ARB or an AC inhibitor become the first preferred choice, and then you second line of drug to be added is a thiazide like diuretic or a calcium channel blocker, and third, when two of them don't do the job, you combine beta blocker, ACARB, calcium channel blocker, and a diuretic. When there's a patient with hypertension and a history of stroke, I think ACARB become the first choice, to which you would add subsequently calcium channel blocker or thiazide like diuretic, and the alternative is add all three. When you have a heart failure and hypertension, I think here the ARNI becomes the first line of therapy if the EF is less than 40%, but heart failure with more than 40%, ARB AC inhibitor are the first choice, along with beta blocker, diuretics, and spironolactone, that is mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist, become very, very crucial. And then you can add, if it's with these combination, that is beta blocker, AC, ARB, mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist, you're still not able to control, then add a calcium channel blocker, which is dihydropyridine. So this is the template that we need to follow. Here, I would like to stop and ask my colleagues' comments. Dr. Vaidyanathan, would you share your thoughts and advice to my physician colleagues? Hello?
The role of beta blocker in pure hypertension is not very high. The role comes when you have a person with an angina or a person with a heart failure. These are the group of drugs where beta blocker will be a compulsory drug, where you will combine even an ARB or an ACE with a beta blocker. In a straightforward, simple hypertension, probably your choice will be between an ARB and a calcium channel blocker, depending upon the age. And addition of a diuretic in an elderly person will be a much better choice, along with the first line of drugs, because hypertension, elderly people respond to diuretics much better. Which diuretic is something which we will discuss over a course of this one. Then starting combination therapy again, dual drug combination will be something which I will be able to start. Will I start everybody on a triple drug combination straight away is something which I am not used to doing. What I personally do is add on the third drug, see whether how much is required, whether here, I mean, response is okay, does not have too much of a fluctuation in blood pressure, especially in elderly person because they may be very sensitive to diuretic. And these are the group of people where you may have problem with combination drugs, even though they are the most difficult people to control. So we know that elderly people have difficulty in getting their blood pressure under control. They are a group of people who may respond to calcium channel blocker and a diuretic, and then probably an ARB. Beta blocker as such, I don't straight away start them on. I start them on dual combination and then change over to triple drug once this dose is standardized. And one concern, even though I understand, in triple drug combination with a diuretic is, I know diuretics act in hypertension not by diuresis alone, except in the initial phase. They are basically drugs which act at the vasculature. So probably giving a diuretic even at night may not be a big issue. But still, patients as well as physicians may be concerned starting a combination with diuretic on the night. Let us ask Dr. Rajiv Gupta, who is a specialist in hypertension. Does he prefer starting a diuretic at night, or does he want to defer it to some other time in the day?
Thank you and good evening, all of you. Two issues I think are very important at this stage of the lecture. The first issue is the diagnosis of hypertension. And I think we have to be very careful, especially in primary care and secondary care, that we do not label people with stage 2 or complex hypertension just based on a single reading or a single day's reading. It's very important that we measure blood pressure repeatedly. We measure blood pressure in the right method, right way. I hope all of you know that. And thirdly, I think it's very important to follow up these patients, either home blood pressure monitoring or multiple clinic-based blood pressure monitorings. And what we find many times is that first visit the blood pressure systolic 160, 170, and you follow up these people for over a period of a week, the blood pressure comes down to 130, 140. So they come from stage 2 to stage 1. The second issue I think is of importance is simple classification, stage 1, stage 2, and complex hypertension. I agree with all of you that single drug therapy normally will not work, but single drug therapy will work in a well-controlled hypertension who has been on 2 drugs for some time. So that is known as de-prescribing. So in the first phase, you prescribe dual or triple anti-blood pressure therapy, depending on the response and depending on the initial level of hypertension. But over a period of 1 month or 2 months of follow-up of that particular patient, you find that the blood pressure is very well controlled. He is adhering to his lifestyle. He is adhering to his drugs. In that case, you could possibly even think of reducing the blood pressure. And finally, I think the question which Dr. Vaidyanathan asked me about the triple drug versus dual drug therapy, personally, it will depend on the comorbid conditions. And I think it's very important to treat the patient, treat the overall vascular risk. And as we move along this lecture, we can go in some more details about the choices of triple drug and dual drug combination. Thank you.
The diagnosis of hypertension, as you said, should not be based on one recording. That is something which is forgone, and everybody understands that it cannot be done on a single recording, especially a clinic recording, where you want to have multiple recordings. And probably you may have to correlate with the target organ damage and the blood pressure to see whether really these people are hypertensive or they are basically white coats which have manifested. So that is a different issue, basically, because diagnosis of hypertension is something which we can discuss, and home blood pressure monitoring, what are the advantages and the fallacies. Like, you have to teach anybody for a home blood pressure recording proper application of the cuff and the cuff size. Unless you do that, probably your measurements may not be good, and you may not really bring out the real data on the blood pressure of this person, because you have to learn to record the blood pressure properly on a cuff and cuff. So those are different factors of hypertension. Here we are basically discussing on therapy and combination therapy assets. That's why I restricted myself to combination therapy rather than other things.
Okay, wonderful, Dr. Vaidnath and Dr. Gupta. It was very insightful. Very important to diagnose. Second, if you diagnose, please treat them strong enough to control them into the target zone without causing hypertensive episodes. That is the essence of today's discussion. Towards that, if I may ask Dr. Gupta, how would you encourage our physician colleagues to aim to control the blood pressure to the targets? How do you manage in your practice, and what do you recommend them?
I think two important components of that is, one is the physician empowerment, that we need to provide our physician colleagues the latest information, that what are the latest trends in treatment of hypertension. And I think most of us will be aware of the dosage of the medication, the side effects of the drugs, and what are the genuine or good combinations, and what are the not very good combinations. And I think you already said about the combining I mean, ACE/ARBs and CCBs and plus minus diuretics, plus minus beta blockers. So I think these are various combinations which can be. So this is the physician empowerment. And I think the more important concept is the patient empowerment. And I tell all of my, even the students also, that if you want that the patient should adhere to you, or you should be his lifelong companion in the journey of hypertension, because it's not a one-day affair, it's a year's affair. You need to have an empowered patient. And I think empowered patient who can measure his blood pressure at his home, who knows how to measure it properly, the technique is good, the machinery is good, and the monitoring is very good. They are the ones who will stick to the treatment, who will adhere to the treatment, and they will possibly do all the right things. So I think both the concepts are important as far as the blood pressure control is concerned.
One thing which I think is to basically make the patient understand that this is a lifelong treatment. It is not something like 5 days treatment, it is cured. They asked me to take it for 1 week, I did not go back. And similarly, on the day they come for a recording of blood pressure, even if you have a home recording of blood pressure, that we should make them understand that the blood pressure medication should have been taken on that day. Because if they have not taken that day's blood pressure medication, you may not be able to tailor your medication to the blood pressure control. So these are two problems which we invariably face as practitioners when patients come to you not taking the medication and they stop the medication in between, basically thinking that blood pressure is cured. I was asked to take for 15 days. So we should make them understand that this is a lifelong treatment, and on the day of your hospital or a clinic visit, you should have had your blood pressure medication.
Yeah, fantastic. I think just one addition that we need to emphasize on physician colleagues, that please treat strong enough to bring it to the target. I see a kind of latency or inertia to uptitrate the drugs or give a good fixed combination drugs which would control 24-hour blood pressure, manage the diurnal variation. I think they just need to be a little more proactive. What is your take on this?
I agree. I mean, treatment to target is the mantra which we all should remember. And we should always specify to a particular patient that these are your targets. First target and second target. So I think now almost all the guidelines, especially the NICE guideline and the European guidelines, are very clear that instead of straight away jumping into the American area of less than 130, tight margins, 120 to 130 systolic, 75 to 80 diastolic. Instead of jumping there, you have first target less than 140, 90, and then second target 130, 85. So I think these are two targets which need to be followed. And it's very clear, very important that every patient, every doctor tells every patient that these are your targets, and then you have to stick to it. An
Correct.
important caveat here is I think we need to also understand that many of our elderly people, if we try to reduce the systolic blood pressure, the diastolic blood pressure also comes down.
True.
Now, we really don't know what is the importance of diastolic blood pressure, but I think most of the cardiologists will agree that less than 60 is possibly harmful because the coronary blood flow is decreased at that point. So I think we need to tell them that there is some lower limit of diastolic blood pressure also. So I think we have to maintain a certain balance in treating isolated systolic hypertension in our patients.
The
Excellent.
isolated systolic hypertension of elderly is one of the most difficult blood pressure to get controlled. Basically, as you said, the diastolic keeps going down. You are always worried about the J curve, the problem of a coronary artery disease getting manifested and other things. That is an area where you may not be able to really achieve a full target even with the best proper treatment. That is a difficult to treat hypertension. That is basically a difficult to treat hypertension category of group of people who have difficulties in getting the systolic blood pressure under control.
Thank you, Dr. Vaidyanathan. I think going forward with the discussion, now when we look at the triple versus dual combination in lowering the systolic blood pressure, if you see calcium channel blocker, hydrochlorothiazide, when you look at that combination, you reduce blood pressure systolic, maybe mean by about 27. But when you try the same with a triple therapy, that is ERB calcium channel blocker with hydrochlorothiazide, you get 37%. So either whether it is ARB, hydrochlorothiazide, calcium channel blocker, hydrochlorothiazide, or ARB with calcium channel blocker, when you combine three of them together, you get additional minimum 10 millimeter more reduction in systolic blood pressure. So that is the essence of combining. So as the targets are not achieved, so you need to up titrate to 2 drug fixed combination and then 3 drug fixed combination therapies. That is where the great advantage of triple combination fixed dose pills will be of great help. The triple drug antihypertensive treatment in a single pill significantly improves adherence. It's not only important to prescribe 3 medicine, it's also important to prescribe them in right dose and make sure that the compliance is achieved. If I write 3 pills and patient keeps forgetting at least 1 or 2 pills in a week, then I would not be giving the patient maximum protection with my treatment. So that is why it is important to reduce the number of pills. And it's great if you can just give 1 pill in containing all 3 pharmacotherapies. So when you look at these, reduction in incidence of missing, when you give just 1 pill which has all the drugs, the compliance improves by more than 50%. So that's the greatest benefit with these fixed dose combinations. Patients receiving 3 pills were 74% less likely to be adherent, 74%. 3 pills are like renin-angiotensin, aldosterone receptor blockers, amlodipine and diuretic. 2 pills are usually RAS and amlodipine plus diuretic or RAS diuretic plus amlodipine. Single pills are either combination of RAS, amlodipine and diuretic all in one. So when you just give 1, there is great reduction in the chance of patients missing a drug. So the compliance significantly improves. Now, I'll ask the panelists, what is the opinion of initiating triple drug combination at high-risk hypertensives from the moment you diagnose? If somebody, he's got a previous history of mild CKD, smoker, hypertension, 180 by 100. So Dr. Vaidyanathan, how would you approach this?
See, CKD. Imagine a combination of, depends upon what is the GFR of person.
1.4 creatinine and potassium is about 4.2.
So there probably a diuretic may be useful if the control of blood pressure. But this is again a group of people who control of blood pressure is always difficult because CKD is associated with difficulties in getting the blood pressure under control. I start them all on triple drug therapy straight away? I am a conservative. I don't straight away start them on all dose therapy. Probably my combination will be an ARB plus an amlodipine or a calcium channel blocker, add on a diuretic at a later time, and I probably will rather assess how do they respond to, and then put them on triple drug therapy and straight away starting them on triple drug therapy.
Thank
There
you.
may be difference between people. There may be people who are comfortably will start them on triple drug therapy. I'm a little conservative on that because I don't want too much of a fluctuations in blood pressure and associated things. So I go with two drugs, add on the third drug. If all of them together, my blood pressure is controlled, I am happy with stability, I push them to for a triple drug.
Thank you. Dr. Rajiv Gupta, your take on this?
I think I'll agree with Dr. Vedanthan here because the usual run-of-the-mill patient, triple drug therapy is very difficult. But we need to identify who are the high-risk people. So who is high risk? One high risk, of course, the CKD is clearly a high-risk hypertensive patient, and we need to be fairly judgmental that where we want to start or where we want to end. So one is, secondly, is patient with coronary artery disease. So coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, again, the choices are different because you need a beta blocker also here. Thirdly is heart failure. Again, heart failure, ARNIs, also lower blood pressure. And then, of course, you have diuretics and a beta blocker. So anyway, you are starting triple drug. So whether you are starting triple drug combination or you are starting double drug combination and adding one more pill, that is, I think, a patient choice. So I think we need to clearly identify what are we looking at, what are the type of complications, and then initiate the therapy. In a simple case, I will possibly initiate with dual therapy and then maybe add on third one.
I agree with you. But then the more complex the hypertension is, the more comorbidities the patient has, I think more aggressive the physician has to be to bring down the blood pressure and maintain it at the target level at the earliest possible for the longest duration possible. So here, look at this slide would tell you the story that positive benefits of prompt BP lowering. The cyst-ure risk reduction, when you looked at it, the prompt versus delayed BP lowering prevented 17 strokes and 25 major cardiovascular events per 1,000 patients followed for 6 years. There's a 13% reduction in all-cause mortality and 15% reduction in CV events. And there's a 28% reduction in stroke. So what it means is from 0 to 10% reduction, the blood pressure, to 0 to 20% reduction in blood pressure versus 0 to 30% reduction. I think we need to look at how much percentage of the systolic blood pressure we intend to control with our pharmacotherapy. And if it is going to be more than 30%, then it's unlikely that just 2 drugs may help us in a quick time, that's prompt reduction. So in which case, I think either we need to closely monitor and call them for review and then add on the third drug, or at the outset, start and tell the patients to keep monitoring, and if the BP becomes less or if they have a symptoms, postural, come back and reduce. I know it's something to be debated, but let me go further and then we'll have a small discussion after this. In the value, the analysis of results based on the immediate response, when you look at the pool treatment groups, the fatal, non-fatal cardiac events were less when there is an immediate responder versus non-immediate responders. Fatal, non-fatal strokes were also significantly less by 17% in the immediate responders versus non-responders. All-cause death was less by 10% in immediate responders. Myocardial infarction was less by 11% in immediate responders, and heart failure hospitalization was less by 13% in immediate responders. So those people for the same drug who quickly respond are at greater benefit than those who take much longer time to benefit. So then when you look at the fixed dose combination, I think we need to initial therapy is RAS plus, you give a beta blocker or a calcium channel blocker or a calcium channel diuretic and a beta blocker or a beta blocker plus diuretic fixed dose pill. And then you look at the second step where triple drug combination of above all these 3. So I think this is what we will be looking at to introduce in those patients in whom we want prompt reduction in blood pressure. Two drugs, wait for about 4 weeks. If you don't, quickly get them into triple drug. When you look at the outcome trials, the metoprolol, which is MERIT-HF, MAFI, low pressure intervention trials, in telmisartan, that is on target, Tresendo and Profess, and chlorthalidone, that is ALHAT, Sprint, SHEP, and TOMS, you would realize that metoprolol efficacy is good, safety is good, tolerability is good, outcome trials are already existent. Telmisartan, again, it's a very well studied molecule with a lot of data already available. Efficacy, safety, tolerability, everything is available, similar with chlorthalidone. So now you're looking at combining three different class of drugs, which are usually not available, but these three drugs have a very good wealth of data available to us. So when you want to treat hypertension, what is crucial is this: benefits of synergistic complementary action, synergetic. You need to block a sympathetic adrenal activity, a RAS activity, and directly acting on the diuretic and natriuretic pathways. When you inhibit a three different the pathophysiological level, that is RAS system, then you have a diuretic system, and then a sympathetic system. So you have the heart rate is reduced by metoprolol, the stroke volume reduced both by CTD and telmisartan, and then the PVR is reduced by telmisartan. So when you look at three different mechanisms, the patient tend to be a fast responder. Drugs with different mechanism of action can enhance the antihypertensive efficacy of each agent when combined. Block counter-regulatory mechanisms, thereby reducing the incidence of side effects. We know when you give a diuretic, it can cause reflex tachycardia. If you combine that with a beta blocker, the tachycardia can be controlled. And you know, by giving a diuretic, we may activate RAS system. And when you use the receptor blocker, RAS renin-angiotensin receptor blocker, you prevent the complementary side effect. So in the SHEF, when you look at the chlorthalidone landmark trials like SHEF, cumulative stroke rates, when you look at it, significant reduction, and p-values very well noticed when compared to the placebo. In the MERIT-HF trial, when you look at the after 7 years, subjects were shifted to chlorthalidone treatment. At the end of the follow-up period, the rate of coronary heart disease mortality in this clinical decreased by 28%. So there's a greater blood pressure reduction with chlorthalidone than hydrochlorothiazide. This was well documented even in 1990. In the ALHAT, event rates for heart failure by treatment group for 1 year, when you look at it, the cumulative heart failure rates, when you look at it, chlorthalidone had the least, and then the lisinopril, and then amlodipine. When you look at the heart failure, I think chlorthalidone had the least heart failure compared to other antihypertensive strategies. Chlorthalidone has greater BP lowering efficacy versus hydrochlorothiazide, especially at night. When you look at the nighttime mean BP reduction and the 24-hour mean BP reduction and daytime mean BP systolic blood pressure reduction, when you look at it, chlorthalidone almost decreases the nighttime mean BP by 2 times compared to hydrochlorothiazide. So why not use a drug in the combination which is more potent and more consistent? And look at now, the question for my colleagues is that what is the opinion of starting chlorthalidone based combination or hydrochlorothiazide based combinations? So if I may ask this time around Dr. Rajiv Gupta first, please.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question actually. So chlorthalidone versus hydrochlorothiazide. Almost all over the world, it was presumed that it was hydrochlorothiazide which were the better antihypertensive drug combinations. But if you look at it, because they have been in use for last almost 70 years now, so they always were supposed to be better because they had more trials, more data. But in the last 30 or 40 years, now chlorothalidone has also emerged as an important problem, important armamentarium as far as drugs are concerned, beginning with the All Hat trial. And you have now clear evidences that chlorothalidone is a better choice as compared to hydrochlorothiazide. It has less natriuretic effect. It has less cardiometabolic harm, especially in terms of diabetes and metabolic syndrome. It has less possibly diuresis effect, so that the natriuresis is lower. And you can safely give it in the evening and night also, so that the pill burden is also reduced. So you can combine that with many other drugs. So I think there's a great shift now going on that chlorothalidone is the preferred, and now we have lots of evidences, even head-to-head comparison trials, which are showing benefit of chlorothalidone as compared to hydrochlorothiazide. So the question is still open. We need larger trials, but then the data, whatever are available as of today, I think I will prefer chlorothalidone as compared to hydrochlorothiazide. The only issue is cost, because it's a slightly more expensive molecule as compared to the other one. So I think, but it's open question. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Dr. Vaidyanathan.
I think I would agree with Dr. Gupta on this, particular aspect of diuretic compared to chlorothalidone. But I am one person who doesn't use either of these drugs very commonly. My choice of diuretics is something different. It is not part of the discussion here. I basically prefer indapamide over these drugs because the advantage of indapamide, I think, is BP efficiency, blood pressure control efficiency is the same, whereas the metabolic profile on LVH and other things are better with indapamide. So I would rather think that a combination with an indapamide will also be a better combination, as good as chlorothalidone or even better.
Yep, I'll agree that we have lots of more data with indapamide as compared to chlorothalidone, because lots of outcome studies have used indapamide combination as compared to chlorothalidone. But by and large, basically both are almost the same group. So I think chlorothalidone.
No, I agree with you, sir. Yeah. It's not a question of debate, but my individual preference, and basically I have enough data to support that also. So
yeah, I agree. Data are huge with indapamide as compared to chlorothalidone.
Sure. I think among the three diuretics, I think these two would be the indapamide and chlorothalidone would probably fare better than hydrochlorothiazide. When you look at the BP control, the natriuresis and diuresis, and the wealth of data in terms of metabolic safety. So I would say that. And when you look at the emerging potential of bifunctional ARBs, moving away from the diuretics, you have bifunctional ARBs, that is activation through PPAR gamma pathways, and then those which are blocked, that is angiotensin 2 pathways when you look at them. So when you look at the PPAR or gamma pathways, there is a decreased dyslipidemia, decreased insulin resistance, decreased cell inflammation, decreased cell proliferation. And when you look at when you block the angiotensin 2 pathways, you will again get the same decreased insulin resistance, decreased inflammation, decreased cell proliferation, and eventually decreased blood pressure and oxidative stress. So they act through two different mechanisms here. And among them, the telmisartan, most studied amongst the ARBs, when you look at it, in mortality and morbidity endpoint trials, when you look at them, that is the iprosartan, olmesartan, irbesartan, candesartan, losartan, valsartan, telmisartan. When you look at all these, the number of patients at the maximum with telmisartan, and then you have valsartan, 51,000 and 44,000 patients. And in the most famous on-target trial, the time to primary outcomes, when you look at it, in the 25,620 patients with vascular disease and high risk of diabetes, comparing telmisartan with the ramipral and telmisartan plus ramipral, when you look at all three of them, the cumulative hazard ratio was almost same. Because there's always this debate that, ACE inhibitors are better than telmisartan for all the events. So is it so? This was published in New England Journal in 2008 on target trial. And the superior BP reduction in morning hours, when you look at the among all the sartans, that is losartan has got the least, and then valsartan is better, amlodipine is much better, but the best is with telmisartan. Both systolic and blood pressure, there's a maximum reduction in early morning BP, because this is where the early morning BP surge is associated with many vascular events, be it stroke or MI or a heart failure. And when you look at the central aortic BP in telmisartan group, you could see that there's a significant reduction when you use telmisartan to reduce blood pressure. The central aortic pressure is much better reduced with telmisartan than any other drug.
Dr. Girish, I think your slide is not moving. Just check, please.
Are you able to see now?
The slide is okay. I think the slide is not moving. For next slide, actually.
Oh, it says your screen is paused.
Yeah, right.
Why is that? Shall I stop share and then I'll share again?
Yeah.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. That's all.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the central aortic blood pressure is much better reduced with telmisartan than others. And when you look at the cardiometabolic sartans, when you look at them, there's a decrease in blood pressure, decreased left ventricular hypertrophy, increased PPR gamma activity, thereby better insulin resistance as well as inflammation, decreased insulin resistance, decreased glucose, and decreased lipids. So it's fantastic. All that you can ask from a molecule, which apart from controlling blood pressure, also helps in multiple other ways to decrease inflammation, diabetes, and dyslipidemia. But when you look at the beta blocker versus placebo, the composite outcomes, when you look at the beta blocker and the placebo, the participants and non-participants, the test of heterogeneity, you will see that in the hypertension, metoprolol extended release, not the regular one, with the extended release, the mean change in sitting diastolic blood pressure and the systolic blood pressure from the baseline to 8 weeks, there's a significant reduction with the sustained release 50 milligram metoprolol, extended release one, and 13 millimeters of mercury reduction with 200 milligrams of metoprolol sustained release is noticed. That means it also gives you a fair bit of reduction in blood pressure. And when you look at the primary prevention in MAFI, when you look at the cumulative number of deaths, comparing thiazide diuretic to beta blocker, there's a 22% relative risk reduction, although p-value is not so great. And the sudden cardiovascular death is decreased by about 30%. I think most of us would believe that beta blocker would definitely reduce the risk of sudden cardiac death, although p-value is good, near good. When you look at the sudden death, the risk reduction with beta blockade, the primary prevention, there's 30% relative risk reduction in sudden cardiac death. Secondary prevention is astounding 42%, means someone who's already had one event and then you want to reduce. And the heart failure, there's a profound 41% relative risk reduction with extended release metoprolol succinate. So what it says is, instead of plain metoprolol, if you use a metoprolol succinate, and there's a significant reduction in sudden cardiac death, primary prevention, sudden cardiac death, secondary prevention, as well as heart failure. In the LVA beta blockade decreased the atherosclerotic progression in carotid intermediate thickness. You can see compared to placebo extended release, there is some reduction. This is to say that it does not accelerate atherosclerosis, not to conclude that it prevents it. And when you look at the all-cause mortality or any cardiovascular event, when you compare metoprolol succinate extended release, there's about 25 milligram. When you compare, there's a significant reduction with the p-value is about 0.31, although that is MI and stroke when you look at them. And when you look in the MERIT-HF, the all-cause mortality was reduced by 34% with a great p-value of 0.0009. So there is significant 34% relative risk reduction. And when you, in the same study, the sudden cardiac death was decreased by 41% with a great p-value, 41%. And when you look at the heart failure with hypertension, history of hypertension, sudden cardiac death in that was heart failure was reduced by about 49% when you use extended release metoprolol succinate. So the question for my panelists is, what is the opinion of metoprolol extended release based combinations in hypertension with coronary artery disease and high RHR? What is your take, Dr. Vaidyanathan? I would start with you, sir.
Basically, we know that beta blocker for time immemorial in secondary prevention as well as prevention of sudden cardiac death. We know that beta blocker has been one of the important drugs. And most of the studies have also shown that those with coronary artery disease as well as heart failure, this is one of the important drugs. And in heart failure, imagine the discussion is what should be started first. Is it a beta blocker or a AC inhibitor? Because we know in heart failure, heart rate reduction is one of the important criteria which has to be used. And three important drugs, beta blockers, which have been used for, which has been approved for use in heart failure, are basically bisoprolol, carvedilol, and metoprolol. And the long-acting metoprolol is the one which has to be used, and it is the succinate and not the tartrate. I think there is no real confusion about role of beta blocker in a group of people like with resting heart, heart failure as well as coronary artery disease. We know that it prevents sudden cardiac death, mortality is reduced, so the outcome is better. Heart failure is well preserved, well controlled, and it prolongs the survival in heart failure. There is no doubt on these issues on beta blocker in this current scenario of this group of people.
And Dr. Gupta, your take on that, sir?
I'll agree. I'll agree with it completely, actually. So beta blockers are compelling indication if you have any evidence of coronary artery disease and heart failure. So I think it's very clear issue. Do not hold back beta blockers in these patients. And any of these three beta blockers, metoprolol, succinate, sustained release, bisoprolol, carvedilol, you can use any of these three. But I think beta blocker must be given to these patients. I think that is the bottom line. Many times I find that many physicians try to stop beta blockers if we have shortness of breath or dyspnea or heart failure evidence. But I think there is very clear evidence we should not. The only debate, as Dr. Vaidyanathan was saying, was when to start in a sequence in heart failure, whether ACE inhibitors first or beta blockers first. And there are now trials which are giving all the 3 or 4 drugs simultaneously. So I think, but there's a very open debate. Still, we don't have any data on that. But I think as a clinician, we'll possibly start first with the diuretics and control the congestion, and then start simultaneously RAS blockade and then beta blockade. So I think that is the usual sequence. Dr. Vaidyanathan may agree with me or disagree with me on the sequence of the drugs.
So diuretic, the minute somebody has a congestion, that becomes one of the drugs for relief of symptoms. So that is why most of the studies have shown in diuretic that heart failure progression has been arrested. Even chlorothalidone, imagine the symptomatically patient was much better. So every drug has a role in it. Diuretic definitely has a role in uncontrolled blood pressure in a heart failure. The question I wanted to raise is only between beta blocker and telmisartan. Not that I don't agree with what you said on diuretic. I don't think anybody can disagree with your take on diuretic.
Yep. No, I think I'll agree. And personally, I think I will possibly start if a person is acute decompensated heart failure, a different way of treatment. Stable heart failure, of course, there's a different way of treatment. So I think there's a debate between stable heart failure, which drug to start first, which drug to start later on. Possibly start RAS blockade and then metoprolol.
Got it. Thank you. So to move on, ARB plus metoprolol, when you combine these two, the blood pressure control would be far superior when ARB and metoprolol are together versus ARB alone. And when you look at the Gemini trial, the beta blocker added to ACE inhibitor ARB therapy can provide clinically relevant additional reductions in blood pressure in patients with type 2 diabetes. When you look at the ACE-ARB, patients with who achieved less than 135 by 85 millimeters of mercury, only 4% with ACE-ARB, but when you added a beta blocker to ACE-ARB, it increased to about 65%. So with an addition of beta blocker, 65% of the patients achieve blood pressure control. Similarly, you can see at 4 weeks, you have a quick reduction in blood pressure. And when you add metoprolol and chlorthalidone in the intra-arterial BP study, when you baseline metoprolol and chlorthalidone alone, there is a significant reduction. But when you add both of them, that is, when you compare telmisartan with hydrochlorothiazide, the reduction is much lesser compared to telmisartan and chlorthalidone. So chlorthalidone and telmisartan seem to be much better combination to reduce the blood pressure. So this Indian study, a multi-center local label, which was seen, when you look at the fixed dose metoprolol extended release, chlorthalidone 12.5, and then telmisartan 40, either metoprolol is 25 or 50 milligram, but chlorthalidone and telmisartan remains the same. When you look at the proportion of patients achieving a systolic blood pressure of less than 140 at the time interval of 12, 16, 20, 24 weeks, the red one is the beta blocker, the A is the 25 milligram, and red one is 50 milligram beta blocker. So when you look at visit at 8 weeks, 12 weeks, or 24 weeks, there's a much better control of blood pressure when you add 50 milligrams of extended release metoprolol along with chlorthalidone 12.5 milligram and telmisartan 40 milligrams. And those who achieved even the diastolic blood pressure less than 90 also rose up to beyond 60 to 50 to 66%. And the mean change in the ambulatory blood pressure, when you look at it at the 12 weeks, compared to 25 milligrams of metoprolol, the 50 milligram gave you much better reduction, both in systolic and mean change in the 24 hours ambulatory diastolic blood pressures. So the question from my panelist, which combination is effective in hypertension with left ventricular dysfunction and coronary artery disease? So can we start with Dr. Gupta, please?
So I think we already talked about the combination therapies in patients with heart failure. One concern which I think all people treating heart failure is whether to use a fixed dose combination therapy in the first few months of treatment or to use it later on. And I'll personally agree there that in the first 1 or 2 months of treatment, we need to give them separate combinations because we need to increase the dose of the RAS blockade slowly. We also need to increase the dose of beta blockers over a period of 2 or 3 months. And of course, diuretics, we need to decrease the dose. So I think, so there is the whole complexity in treatment of especially heart failure or LV dysfunction. And then at some point, we also want to add mineralocorticoid receptor antagonists so that MRAs have to be added. And now, of course, we also want to add them SGLT2 inhibitors. So I think, so there's a rather complex situation too. So I will possibly think that in the first 2 or 3 months, I will give them separate pills of each of these. And only after once they are stabilized on a particular dosage, I will change over to double drug or a triple drug combination therapy.
Fantastic. Your take, sir, Dr. Vaidyanathan, sir?
I think nobody can disagree with that statement at this juncture for this particular situation, because basically the problem with fixed drug combination is you cannot titrate the drug which you want to increase or decrease based on the clinical scenario early. So in the early part of your clinical scenario, you want to titrate individual drug to the maximum possible in heart failure, and then decide what is the dose the person probably tolerates. So you cannot totally titrate it when you start a fixed dose combination. So I think the fixed dose combination takes away the titrating ability. So I would rather say diuretic, AC inhibitor, beta blocker, whatever I want to start, and then probably as you congestion comes down, probably you will reduce diuretic, you will increase the other drugs, add on a mineralocorticoid, which will also look after the blood pressure. So I would rather late in the natural history of the disease, after I have controlled everything, my control scenario may be a combination, but early will not be a combination. I don't think anybody can disagree on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
fantastic. I think there are two groups of LV dysfunction patients that we'd be seeing, one with an LVEF of less than 40%, the other group which is going to be LVEF between 40 to 50%. So I think in that group, which is less than 40%, I think this fixed dose combination is not the right choice, because it's going to be ARNI, beta blocker, then you will have an SGLT2 inhibitor, and then a mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist, and then loop diuretic. I think we are looking at a group which is probably EF more than 40%. And then if you look at giving one pill for hypertension control, there may be a scope for this combination. I think this fits in this probably zone. You may say it in those whose EF is definitely more than 40%, and you would like to reduce the number of pills. So what's your take on that, Dr. Gupta?
so. I think now we have more phenotypic complications. That means we have low ejection fraction heart failure, we have mid-range ejection fraction heart failure, and we have normal ejection heart failure or normal ejection fraction heart failure. I think and hypertension, of course. So I think we need to be very careful that what we are trying to treat, we need to exactly classify the phenotypic ways. As of today, I think low ejection fraction and mid-range, the treatment strategies are almost the same. So up to 45 or 50 ejection fraction, possibly I'll go with a slow increase in the or titrate the therapy, and beyond 50%, I may start a combination therapy. Personally, I will not, but I think it's a doable thing.
Your take on that, Dr. Vaidyanath? Because
see, basically, I may not start them on a good dose of diuretic when the mid-range, unless the blood pressure is so high. And when I would rather like to continue aldactone in this group of spironolactone group of drugs in this group of people, rather than a regular diuretic like a chlorthalidone or a indapamide or whatever I use. So basically, unless the blood pressure is very high, my combination will be a beta blocker and ARB blocker and spironolactone combination rather than one of these diuretics.
Right. So I think my understanding has been that ejection fraction less than 40% is one pathophysiology, and ejection fraction more than 40% and preserved ejection fraction heart failure, they both tend to behave similarly. Between 40 to 60% with the heart failure tend to behave. That's why there are no much clinical trials in patients with EF of more than 40% where you have conclusively proven that these drugs will significantly reduce mortality or hospitalization, unless for controlling the blood pressure or something. So I think when you focus on blood pressure control rather than treatment of heart failure in those EF which are more than 40%, I think fixed dose combination could still have their places, because I know indapamide could be a great drug, but again, having the combination with that drug is still a challenge at this point of time. Although one or two makers could be there, their availability and the adherence is still a challenge. So that was my take. And if you allow me, I would like to proceed. Hypertension with LVH often contributes CHF by 75% and CVEN by about 30%. LV mass index reduction by 25 grams per meter square equals to 20% risk reduction in CVE, cardiovascular events. When you look at the LVM regression, left ventricular mass, chlorthalidone decreases by about 12% per gram per meter square, telmisartan by about 9 gram, and then metoprolol by about 7. So when you combine all these, it may not be that profound individually. Collectively, it could be a little lesser, but much better. So the increased heart rate is again, Increased heart rate is again a long-term predictor of cardiovascular events in high-risk hypertension.
Excuse me, sir. You went on mute, sir.
I'm so sorry. Okay, sorry. Increased heart rate is again long-term predictor of cardiovascular events, events in high-risk hypertension. So it becomes very, very important that we control the heart rate too. Okay. When you look at the, increasing resting heart rate and adverse cardiovascular outcomes in hypertension with CAD, as the heart rates come down, go on increasing. If you look at the heart rates between 55 to about 70, there's a almost same cardiovascular events, adverse outcomes. Least is between 60 to 70 beats per minute. But then as the heart rates rise beyond 85, or when they become more than 100, there's almost 3-time increase in the adverse outcome. So it's very important that you have a drug in the combination which controls the heart rate. And adding beta blockade to ongoing treatment of hypertension is very, very crucial. My dear colleagues, do you think controlling BP is enough for reducing the cardiovascular events in high-risk hypertensive patients with increasing heart rate? I know none of us agree, but I would still ask for your opinions. How would you manage?
Yeah, I think there is no confusion about the heart rate business. So I think it's very clear that we need to reduce heart rate in patients with high risk hypertension. So one way of doing it is, of course, beta blockers, and I think that is the best way of doing it because they do well with that. If a person is asthmatic, or if he has contraindication to beta blockade, now we have choices available with us. So Ivabradine or other things are also useful in hypertension, but they don't do anything to the high blood pressure. Lots of people also use, especially in a uncomplex, normal function hypertension, as non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers like verapamil or diltiazem. So I think they are choices, and lots of people, at least in UK, prefer to use verapamil. Although in India we are not very fond of that molecule. But the problem is that it has to be used in slightly higher dose. Low dose will not work as an antihypertensive.
Got it. I think we all agree, so I will just move forward. Advantage of beta blocker and ARB and clotharidone triple combination, evidence-based rationale when you look at the combination. Among the ARBs, telmisartan is really good, gold standard. Among beta blockers, metoprolol is again a great gold standard. And among diuretic, clotharidone is really emerging. And when you look at the benefit of this triple drug combination, there are threefold increase in benefits, threefold decrease in mortality, and there's a threefold decrease in morbidity too. So there is a comprehensive reduction in target organ damage and complications when you use this combination. So only the right key opens the right lock. It's just for the understanding. That means you need to address 3 different mechanisms with one treatment strategy, which this gives. So I think this is where I conclude, and I ask Dr. Vaidyanathan and Dr. Gupta's comment, and then we shall take some questions.
Thank you for a very nice presentation. I think the discussion has brought out what all points we have to discuss. So the comment as such, we know. One question which I would like to ask you is, in a straightforward, simple hypertension, you not complicated by anything. When you want to use a combination, how comfortable are you using telmisartan beta blocker combination?
Yes.
How rational it is a combination?
Absolutely. If I have a young hypertensive where there is an increased heart rate and there is a blood pressure beyond probably 160/90, I think a beta blocker would still be an integral part of it. Second, the young hypertensive, beta blocker would still be a combination to me. Second, any ischemic heart disease or a heart failure with hypertension, which many of my patients, as an interventional cardiologist, large proportion of my patients will continue to have a beta blocker, and they do have hypertension and diabetes. So it becomes the most logical combination for me is a telmisartan and a beta blocker. But in a garden variety of 60 years and older hypertensive, who does not have either ischemic heart disease or a heart failure, I don't think beta blocker belongs there. But in my practice as an interventional cardiologist, there are a lot of patients who will benefit from this combination.
Well, I'll totally agree with whatever you are saying, and I'll put a new idea into the whole equation:
Yes.
treatment of high-risk hypertension. Now, we all know that we need to combine blood pressure medication. We need to give them 2 or 3 medications. But now the data are emerging of use of polypills. So polypills, combination of statins with high blood pressure, aspirin with hypertension, and of course the polypill trial clearly showed the benefit. So that again, I think, is a debatable issue, that what drugs to use, polypill formulation. Personally, although I was part of the trial, but personally, I think the combination that we use in India, atenolol and ramipril and simvastatin, was not a very good combination. They use a different telmisartan-based combination in Iran, which is poly-Iran trial, and they use telmisartan and metoprolol and rosuvastatin. Although it was the amount of benefit was the same in both the trials. But I think that is the future. And I think we need to think of that also when we talk of combination therapy of hypertension.
Dr. Vaidyanathan, you had some other question.
No, the question was combination of a beta blocker with telmisartan in a uncomplicated hypertension or for a primary prevention. My question is,
I agree with you. I think for primary prevention, beta blockers have no evidence that they are useful.
and then
The only evidence is that yes, they reduce lots of morbidity endpoints. That means they reduce palpitations. They possibly reduce feeling of unwellness. I mean, people feel comfortable taking beta blocker, especially young people, lots of sympathetic overdrive. So they feel very comfortable. So quality of life versus the outcome, that is the big debate we need to understand, that whether we like to use it or not. Many people are not afraid of erectile dysfunction caused by beta blockade, and many young people will not even take it. I mean, they will stop it even if you prescribe it. So I think it's a difficult issue that we need to discuss with our patients before we start this drug.
And a few years back, when all of us would have presented a slide, there is a hexagon, where combination drugs, which are the ideal combination drugs, which was recommended by the ESC, if I remember correct. That combination, the ARB beta blocker combination in a routine hypertension is not considered to be a rational combination. That has been taught in medical college also, because both of them act almost at the same renin-angiotensin
pathways,
pathway. So personally, the role of that combination, according to me, people may disagree, is basically in coronary artery disease, heart failure, that group of patients where the combination is absolutely rational, you should continue. In a person, straightforward, simple diabetes, nothing else, and requires more than one drug to control hypertension, we all know. Will I combine a beta blocker as the second choice of drug? I probably will do it as the third or fourth trial of drugs. Let me be honest.
No, that's the right thing. It's not about honest, that's the right thing to do. But again, we should never forget a heart rate. As a cardiologist, heart rate is also very, very crucial in every hypertensive that we treat. Even with a good blood pressure control, if the heart rates are 90, 100, I think there's a role for a beta blocker. And many garden variety of hypertensives, I'm sure, with calcium channel blocker, ARB, and diuretic combination will still not be able to control blood pressure. You will need a fourth drug where a beta blocker would be required. Although the guidelines say add a spironolactone, but again, you need to monitor the potassium, monitor the creatinine. I think most people use beta blockers ahead of amlodipine as the fourth drug, and probably fifth becomes the amlodipine in the practice of what we have seen. What's your take on that?
See, the calcium channel blockers, the greatest disadvantage of calcium channel blockers has been an increase in heart rate. And the cardiovascular protection was not shown much in calcium channel blockers earlier, because the rate was one of the issues considered, which increases the outcome, decreases the outcome benefits. And probably in diabetes, whether the intraglomerular pressure, blah, blah, those things have to be discussed. So that is why there is a continuing search for a beta blocker which decreases the heart rate or does not at least increase the heart rate. I don't know whether Rajiv Gupta will agree with that, but heart rate is an issue in most of the cases. We want a lesser heart rate. That is one of the drawbacks of calcium channel blockers in the earlier generations. But now you have drugs which may not increase, but if heart rate is an issue, somebody with an autonomic dysfunction and other thing, if you want to reduce the heart rate, probably your choice.
Yeah. I think one is the age-based
Yes.
stratification.
I think we had a wonderful, Dr. Gupta, you're muted. Could you?
Oh. Yeah, I think we need to understand that we need to.
Dr. Gupta, you're muted.
Oh, I'm not on my computer, maybe a central one. So it's not showing here. No.
You are audible now.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I think the issue here is the clear evidence that we need to understand the patient precision medicine. So individual patient, we need to titrate drugs according to their profile and then manage the patient. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Girish? Dr. Girish, can you hear me? Dr. Girish, can you hear me, sir?
Girish is muted. Girish has to unmute.
Dr. Deepak, I think some question is there. Dr. Deepak?
Chat box does not have any question.
No, the question will
Thank
come to
you.
the person. Yeah. Dr. Girish, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, now I can hear. Sorry, my
Yeah.
speaker stopped
I
working.
think let's have some questions from the audience. So, yeah, Dr. Deepak, just facilitate, please. Doctor, unmute yourself, Dr. Deepak. Pratik, can you hear me? Pratik, is there any questions? Pratik,
Yes, I'm putting.
please.
I still believe in my practice, there's a lot of scope for this combination. A beta blocker, ARB, and a diuretic. And then you can add the first calcium channel blocker in those with any kind of IHT, heart failure, and even in those very young hypertensives where heart rates are significantly higher. But many others, probably you would use a triple drug combination of calcium channel blocker, ACE inhibitor, ARB, or a diuretic. Then you add a beta blocker and aldactone. I think it doesn't matter which combination you use. I think you need to get the comfort of the patient, get a good adherence of the patient, and third, achieve a consistent reduction in 24-hour BP reduction and probably a long-term a year's control of the blood pressure. I think that has been the challenge for the community with the advent of these triple drug combinations. I think it becomes much easier for patients to manage their adherence and control pressure. Are there any questions or?
I think
there in the chat box, there are questions you could answer.
Yeah.
Okay, there are about 5. So for Dr. Gupta, give some light on diastolic hypertension too. Would you comment on that?
Yeah, I think diastolic hypertension, I mean, if you look back at the history of hypertension, beginning from the Framingham Heart Study and the JNC reports 1 to 4 at least, they all focus on diastolic hypertension. So initially the target of treatment was diastolic hypertension. But now in the last 50 years or so, we have realized that it is the systolic blood pressure which is possibly more important than diastolic. What we are now concerned with is, we talked earlier also in the session, is reducing the diastolic blood pressure below a certain level. And I think that's very important as far as the cardiovascular disease is concerned, because in patients with coronary artery disease, the blood flow reduces in the coronary arteries if the diastolic blood pressure is less than 60. So I think there's the, I think, current consensus.
I get it. I get it. The other question that I have for Dr. Swaminathan is, sorry, let me just go up. Is there a contraindication for this combination and a compelling side effects to withdraw this? Would you comment on that, Dr. Vaidyanathan?
Now you are muted, Dr. Vaidyanathan.
Please unmute yourself, Dr. Vaidyanathan.
The combination will not be given if there is a contraindication for any particular member of this combination. Like a beta blocker cannot be given due to a low heart rate, or if somebody is an asthmatic, you cannot give them a beta blocker, or if somebody has a severe renal dysfunction, hyperkalemia, where you cannot give this combination. So these combinations are indicated in specific group of people. The contraindication varies from person to person. Only those group of people. There is no fixed contraindication like this cannot be given for this group of people, except probably, individual, like a renal failure, you are not going to push in so much of ARB or ACE. And now probably in a severe renal failure, your diuretic may not function. If somebody has a peripheral vascular disease, or somebody has a chronic, COP, pulmonary disease, you may not put them on beta blocker. Even there are some other beta blockers which may be combined. Probably those all will come in the market over a period of time to circumvent these specific contraindications by individual drugs.
Thank you, sir, for this answer. Sir, actually, there are a few more questions. So, if you permit, may I ask this? May I ask, sir?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Dr. Rajesh from Sambalpur, he is asking, in elderly, we should start with lower dose because of arterial sclerosis. So, there will be any false reading. So, his question is actually lower dose, whether we can use a lower dose in arterial sclerosis.
Yeah, it's very important in an elderly patient. You start slow, start low. Means you start with a smaller dose. Take a while to make sure that he does not have a postural drop in the systolic blood pressure. Teach the patient what are the symptoms of postural hypertension, like lightheadedness, extreme tiredness, or feeling giddy. All these, if you tell them, and to check home blood pressure while standing, these will guide you. So start small doses and then slowly up titrate. As we discussed previously, that as you control the systolic blood pressure, they tend to have isolated systolic hypertension than a combined systolic and diastolic hypertension. So don't get too aggressive too quickly. So gradually start and up titrate. So it's a right policy to start small dose and then up titrate. Next question, please.
Thank you, sir. One more question, that is from Dr. Gautami from Bhatpara. Line of treatment in a 28-year-old patient with blood pressure 178 by 100, pulse rate 94 per minute pulse rate.
So, Dr. Gupta, would you like to take that?
Yep. I think the important thing here is, first of all, to rule out any secondary causes of hypertension.
Perfect.
A young person in this age group, we always need to exclude secondary causes of hypertension, kidney disease or aortic disease or lesser other causes. So we need to, first of all, investigate that. And once we are certain that there is no secondary cause, there is just a primary cause of hypertension, even then on the back of our mind, that should always be a question whether we are missing something. And then, of course, we start with usually dual drug therapy, and then we rapidly go on to the triple drug. So the blood pressure is not well controlled.
So which are the two dual drugs that you would use, Dr. Vaidyanath, here?
See, one catch here is the heart rate, 94. And an younger person, where we know that there is a stage in hypertension where there is sympathetic overactivity, increased heart rate, increased cardiac output, that sort of state where a beta blocker may be still useful. Can I ask a question to Gupta? Will you use a routine metoprolol here, or will you use one of the newer beta blockers with less side effects?
Yeah, I think possibly I will use a newer beta blocker like nebivolol, or which has a less, side effects, typical side effects of a beta blocker. So you could use bisoprolol or nebivolol. Both are good choices in this particular patient. But then again, we need to be sure that the tachycardia is not because of the apprehension or like white coat hypertension, is permanent tachycardia.
Now, all these people probably, if your target organ damage is not there, probably will undergo a ABPM and decide what is the basic blood pressure and pulse rate also in those group of people before we decide on a proper treatment of this.
Very true. To Dr. Gautami Roy, what I would say is, in a young year old, 178 by 100 is slightly unusual. So please calm them down, request them to wait another 30 minutes, recheck, or do an ambulatory blood pressure. It may be much lesser. Don't jump to a big dose. It may quickly come down once they go home. So maybe a selective beta blocker and a small dose of ARB may help you. But prior to that, you should have always done a renal Doppler for renal artery stenosis, endocrine workup. You're not missing any endocrine tumors and other kidney diseases. So the next question is by Dr. Rajesh. Rajendra Kumar.
Yes.
Elderly individual, high blood pressure and diabetes. How long to continue diuretic as combination with either CCB or ARB? Do we have to check electrolytes and blood sugar more frequently? So, Dr. Vaidyanath, can you answer that question?
Yeah, elderly are the group of people who are prone for hyponatremia with the diuretics. So these are group of people who require a better care or more tenuous care rather than an younger person. So you have to be very careful in the usage of diuretic, but unfortunately diuretics are the one which produce a good reduction in blood pressure. They will require frequent monitoring of for hyponatremia, hypokalemia, etc. What I do is I check it after say around 2 to 3 weeks on this diuretic, electrolytes, and probably at the end of third month, if things are under control, I continue. When there is a peak of summer, I probably tell them to reduce the diuretic a little bit, because that is sometime when you have so much loss of sodium and other things. Their hypernatremia sometimes may be precipitated, and even their blood pressure may be lower, they require a lower dosage.
Dr. Gupta, would you like to add anything?
I'll agree that hyponatremia is a very real problem with the diuretics, especially at the older age. So I think I'll be very cautious and keep monitoring electrolytes frequently, more in summers, of course.
I think it's ideal to check about 2 to 4 weeks after you initiate, especially an ACRB with a diuretic combination, to look at the creatinine as well as potassium and sodium. If they remain stable, I think maybe after another 2 months, you can check once. Most people tolerate it well. Some of them, maybe about 20 to 30%, will develop either hyperkalemia or hyponatremia. So then better to switch diuretic to either calcium channel blocker and see how they do it. So whenever you initiate ARB and AC and diuretic, please check creatinine and potassium and sodium. That's a good practice. There's another question. Hyperuricemia, is it any different between hydrochlorothiazide and chlorthalidone?
Hydrochlorothiazide produces slightly more hyperuricemia as compared to chlorthalidone. So there are some subtle differences. But if there is hyperuricemia, possibly I will not use either of them.
Okay.
Loop diuretic possibly is a better choice.
Good, fantastic. I think that answers most of these questions here. I think we had a very meaningful discourse. I think a lot of discussion has thrown up the different clinical scenarios where physicians should really have had some idea how to approach different subsets: young, elderly, diabetic, hypertensive, heart failure. And I thank my senior colleagues, Dr. Rajiv Gupta and Dr. P.R. Vaidyanathan, sir. It's been a wonderful time, and I thank Ajanta for bringing all of us together. And I'll hand it over to Ms. Kanu
Thank you.
Agarwal.
Thank you, sir. So it was a wonderful program. Really, we're really very honored to have all your presence in this meeting. And I believe many insight has been shared in the management of hypertension with the different conditions. I believe all my audience will be greatly enriched with this clinical experience. And I also like to extend thanks to all the audience, those who have spared time in this difficult time. So I believe everybody is taking care of their own safety and COVID appropriate all precaution they are taking. So with that positive note, let's stay healthy and stay safe. Thanks, Doctor, once again. Dr. Girish, wonderful presentation. Dr. Rajiv Gupta, wonderful, sir. And Dr. Vaidyanathan, sir, wonderful. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Thanks a lot.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
So good, sir. Very
Thank you, sir.
nice. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.